I want to tell you about a notebook, not a laptop, not a cloud drive, not some sophisticated piece of technology that took years to build. A plain, spiral bound notebook, the kind you could buy for $2 at any newsagent, that I carried in the front pocket of my chef's apron for 3 years, that I filled, page by page, with my own handwriting, that had my name written on the inside cover. That notebook is why this story ends the way it does. But before I get to the ending, and I promise you, the ending is worth it, you need to understand what that notebook was, what was in it, and why the people who fired me didn't realize until it was far too late exactly what they had told me to take with me when I left. My name is Jamie. I am 26 years old. I live in Australia, a mid-sized town, the kind of place where everyone knows the good restaurants and everyone talks about them. I trained as a chef through an apprenticeship program, the way it works here. Part-time at college learning theory and technique, part-time in a real kitchen learning how things actually operate. 200 recipes, stocks and sauces and pastry and classical technique and everything in between. 3 years of training alongside 3 years of working. One until the two became inseparable, and I couldn't remember which knowledge had come from a classroom and which had come from standing over a hot stove at 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning. By the time I was fully qualified, I had been working at the same place for nearly 4 years. A sports club, a large, busy, popular sports club in our town. The kind of place that does 100 covers on a Saturday. That hosts corporate functions and birthday parties and end-of-season celebrations and fundraising dinners. The kind of place that sounds unremarkable until you understand that in a town like ours, a venue like that is an institution. People have their anniversaries there. People have their retirement parties there. Regulars come in on Friday nights the way other people go to church. And for 4 years, the food that kept them coming back was mine. If you're watching this, hit subscribe and let me know where you're tuning in from because what happened with that notebook is something nobody in that kitchen saw coming. Nobody except me. Here is something they do not tell you about professional kitchens, at least not in the way that matters. They run on institutional memory, recipes, ratios, the specific way this sauce is seasoned, the exact temperature at which this cut of meat needs to rest, the particular combination of spices that makes the house dessert taste the way it does and not some other way. That knowledge lives somewhere, in the head of the senior chef, in a battered folder in the back office, was in the collective memory of whoever has been there longest. When I arrived at the sports club as an apprentice, that knowledge was scattered. There was an official recipe book, or there had been once, a laminated binder in the dry store that management referenced when they needed to check a dish. But nobody had updated it in years. New dishes had been added to the menu without being written down anywhere. Old dishes had evolved as chefs came and went, were each one making small adjustments until the version on the plate bore only a passing resemblance to whatever the original recipe said. This created a problem. When a new cook joined the kitchen, there was no reliable document to hand them. The head chef would explain things verbally. Other cooks would fill in the gaps. And every time someone left, a little more institutional knowledge walked out with them. I noticed this in my first few months. And I did what I had always done when I noticed a problem. I tried to fix it.
What's that you're writing?
My supervisor asked me this one afternoon, looking at the notebook I'd started keeping. I explained. Every time I learned how a dish was supposed to be made, the official version, the club's version, not the college version, I wrote it down. Method, quantities, plating instructions. If the head chef changed something, I updated it. If a dish was added to the menu, it went in the book. He looked at it for a moment, then he shrugged.
Good habit. Keep that up.
So I did. What I did not know, what nobody seemed to know, or perhaps nobody cared enough to mention, was that management had quietly stopped updating the official binder around the time I started. The laminated folder in the dry store gathered dust. My notebook, which I had started as a personal study tool, became the only complete, current record of how the club's food was actually supposed to be made. I didn't know this for more than a year. By the time I understood what my notebook had become, it was already indispensable. Other cooks started using it. That is the simplest way to describe what happened. It started small. A newer apprentice asking if they could check a sauce recipe. a line cook confirming a spice measurement before a function. I was happy to let them. It was useful information. I wanted the food to be consistent. And honestly, there was something satisfying about having built something that other people found valuable. Then it became routine. The notebook sat on the pass during service. People consulted it the way you consult a dictionary, not because they didn't know the answer, but because they wanted to be sure. New dishes went straight into my book as a matter of course. If the head chef tweaked a recipe, someone would say, "Put that in Jamie's book." I was still an apprentice. I was still being paid at apprentice rates. And my notebook had become the de facto official recipe record for a venue that served hundreds of people every week. I thought this was fine. I thought this was, in fact, great. I was contributing something real and useful, and the kitchen ran better for it. I was proud of it the way you're proud of something you built from nothing, with your own hands, in your own time. The thing I did not understand yet was that my pride and my value to the organization were two separate things. One of them was going to protect me, the other wasn't. I finished my apprenticeship at the end of my third year, officially qualified, fully trained, and that was when the calculation changed. An apprentice is a bargain. You are learning while you work. The wage reflects that. Everyone understands the arrangement. A fully qualified chef is a different proposition, a different wage bracket, a different set of expectations around what that investment looks like on a balance sheet. I had not changed. The work I was doing had not changed. The notebook had not changed. The only thing that had changed was a piece of paper that said I was now worth more per hour than I had been the day before. And management, who had never mentioned this, who had let 4 years go by without a single conversation about what my qualification would mean for my employment, suddenly started looking at me differently. Not openly, not immediately. The way these things always happen, it was slow and subtle and deniable. One, I was left off the schedule for a big function. A newer apprentice was given a shift that had historically been mine. Small things, the kind of things that could be explained away individually and only formed a pattern when you stood back and looked at all of them at once. I brought it up with Marcus, the venue manager. A good-natured conversation, I told myself. Professional? I just wanted to understand where I stood. He smiled the way he always smiled and said,
Jamie, we love having you here. You're a real asset to this team. We're just working through some scheduling challenges at the moment. Nothing to read into. You'll be back on the full rotation soon.
I nodded. I believed him. Or I wanted to believe him, which is a different thing that feels the same from the inside. 3 weeks later, they called me in for a meeting. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The lunch service had just finished. I was still in my chef's whites when Marcus called me into the small office off the main corridor, the one that was used for stock takes and performance reviews and conversations that needed to happen away from the kitchen floor. He had a woman from HR with him. I remember thinking, that's not a good sign. HR doesn't show up for conversations about nothing.
Take a seat, Jamie. We wanted to have a chat with you about the team going forward.
I sat, I waited.
We've had a look at our staffing structure and we think we need to make some changes. We're going to be bringing in someone new for the kitchen. A bit of fresh energy, a different approach. As part of that, we've made the decision that your role won't be continuing.
There it was. Dressed up, of course. Softened. The language of restructures and fresh energy and decisions rather than the simpler language of, we found someone cheaper and we're letting you go. I sat with it for a moment. You're replacing me with another apprentice, I said, not a question.
We're making a change to the structure of the kitchen team.
He didn't deny it. I thought about 4 years. I thought about the functions and the Friday nights and the Sunday mornings. I thought about every new dish that had gone on the menu and found its way into my notebook. I thought about the notebook sitting on the pass right now, at this moment, in the kitchen 20 meters from where I was sitting. I thought about the binder in the dry store that nobody had touched in years. And then I did something I am still proud of. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I looked at Marcus with the steadiest expression I could manage and I said, understood. I'll collect my things before I go.
Of course, take everything that's yours. We want to make this as easy as possible for you.
Take everything that's yours. I nodded. I thanked him for his time, which I still find remarkable that I thanked him, and I walked back out to the kitchen, and I picked up my notebook from the past. I want to be honest about what happened in those next few minutes because it was not a grand plan. It was not revenge, exactly, or not yet. It was something simpler and more instinctive than that. The notebook was mine. I had written every word in it. I had bought it. My name was on the inside cover. When I walked through that kitchen for the last time, collecting my knives, which are always the chef's own property, always, and my spare apron and the few personal items I kept in my locker, I picked up the notebook because it was mine to pick up. Nobody stopped me. Nobody said anything. The other cooks watched in that quiet, uncomfortable way that people watch when they know something has happened but haven't been told officially yet. One of them, Priya, caught my eye and gave me a small nod that meant everything and nothing at the same time.
Quietly, you okay?
Yeah, I said, I'm good. And I walked out. It was not until I was sitting in my car in the car park, notebook on the passenger seat, that I understood what I was holding. Not just a personal diary, not just a study guide, the recipe book, the only complete, current, accurate recipe book for every dish on the menu of a venue that served several hundred people a week. I sat there for a long time. Then I drove home. As the notebook went on my kitchen table and I made myself a cup of tea and I thought very carefully about what to do next. A few days passed. I was in that strange, untethered state that follows the end of any job you didn't expect to lose. Too much quiet, too much time to think, the sudden absence of routine where routine had been. And then my phone started ringing. The first call was from someone I didn't know well, a cook who had started at the club a few months before I left. He had some questions about preparation methods that I'd shown him and wanted to check his memory against the book. He didn't know I didn't have access to the book anymore. He thought he was calling me as a colleague. I explained what had happened. There was a pause.
Oh, that's. Yeah. Things have been a bit chaotic in here since you left, to be honest.
I filed that away. The second call came from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, it was someone from club management, not Marcus, a different manager. He introduced himself warmly, asked how I was doing, made some small talk, and then, with the particular careful casualness of someone who very much needs something from you,
We've been having a few consistency issues in the kitchen since the transition. Nothing major. But I was wondering if you might still have that notebook of yours, the one with all the recipes. We'd love to get a copy if you.
it's my notebook, I said. I bought it, I wrote it, my name is on the inside cover. A long pause.
Of course, nobody's disputing that. We were just thinking if you wanted to make a copy available as a goodwill gesture.
You told me to take everything that was mine, I said. I did. I hung up. He called again. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was warmer and more apologetic and still, underneath the warmth, asking for the same thing. I did not return it. I am not going to pretend I didn't check. I knew the sports club's profile online, the way you know any place you have worked for years. The regular commenters, the frequency of reviews, the particular things people praised, and the particular complaints that came up occasionally. I had a sense of the baseline. I knew what the food was supposed to taste like because I had made it hundreds and hundreds of times. Within a week of my departure, the reviews started changing. Not dramatically at first. A comment that the lasagna wasn't quite right. A mention that the desserts had been better last time. Small, specific things that would only stand out to someone who had been following closely, as which I was. Then, at the end of that first week, something happened that I had not anticipated and that I still find slightly astonishing when I think about it. 50 negative reviews in a single day. 50. In a town our size, on a platform that might get 2 or 3 reviews on a busy week, this was, there is no other word for it, catastrophic. Bland food, dry cakes, classics that were off, dishes that didn't taste like they used to. Not coordinated as far as I could tell. Just a genuine, spontaneous outpouring from people who had been coming to that club for years and had noticed, collectively and simultaneously, that something had gone badly wrong with the food. I read all 50 reviews. I am not proud of how long I spent doing this, but I am also not going to lie and say I didn't find it satisfying, because I did. Not because I wanted the club to fail, not because I wanted anyone to lose their job, but because I had given 4 years to a place that had calculated I was expendable the moment I cost them a few more dollars an hour. And those 50 reviews were, in their strange collective way, the truth. The truth about what the food had been and who had made it that way, when and what happened when that person was told they could no longer offer what the club was looking for. What they had been looking for had been me. They just hadn't known it until I was gone. About a week after I left, I got a call from someone I had known at the club. Not a manager, not a cook, but a regular. A man who came in most Friday evenings with his wife and had done so for as long as I had been cooking there. He had my number because I had helped him source a specific ingredient for a party he'd held at the venue once, and we had stayed in casual contact the way you sometimes do with people who appreciate your work. He had heard through mutual acquaintances that I was no longer at the club. He asked what I was doing next. I told him I wasn't sure yet. There was a pause, and then he said,
My brother owns a restaurant across town. Small place. Good food, good people, not a lot of volume. He's been looking for someone who actually cares. Would you want me to put the two of you in touch?
I said yes. The interview, if you could call it that, lasted about 40 minutes. The owner, a man in his 50s, who had been running kitchens since before I was born, looked at my knife roll, asked me a few questions about technique, and then made me a cup of coffee and talked to me like a human being for half an hour about what he was trying to do with the restaurant. What he thought food in this town was missing. What he believed a kitchen should feel like. Well, I told him I had a notebook full of recipes. He raised an eyebrow.
A notebook?
A personal notebook, I said. My own recipes. Things I developed over the years. Nothing proprietary. All my own work. Because that was true. The recipes in that book were the club's menu, yes, but they were the club's menu as I had written it down, adjusted it, developed it, made it better over 4 years. Nobody had told me to write them. Nobody had paid me to write them. They were as much mine as the handwriting they were written in. He asked if he could take a look. When I handed him the notebook, he read through it for a long time. Then he closed it and put it on the table between us and said,
When can you start?
I started at the restaurant within the month. And then I did something that was, in retrospect, almost too satisfying to have been accidental. I put the recipes on the menu. Not all of them, not immediately. But dish by dish, over the first few months, I started cooking the food I knew, the food I had spent 4 years refining, in a kitchen that actually wanted it. And the people who had been eating that food on Friday nights at the sports club for years, the regulars, the families, the people who had been coming in for anniversaries and celebrations, they started finding their way to us. At first, it was a trickle, a familiar face or two, surprised to see me behind a different past. Then word spread, the way it does in small towns, quietly and then all at once. After about 3 months, about a third of our menu came from that notebook, and the flow of customers from the sports club had become a steady current. Not a flood, not every regular, but enough. Enough to show up in their numbers, enough to scare investors, enough that the club sent 3 of their senior managers to eat with us one evening. And I watched from the past as they sat there with their menus open, recognizing the food. After the meal, the most senior of them came back to the kitchen. He asked to speak to me. I stepped out of the kitchen. We stood in the corridor near the back door, and he asked, with the particular awkward dignity of a man performing an errand he finds embarrassing,
We were wondering if there's any arrangement we could come to regarding the notebook. Regarding getting some of those recipes back, we think it would be beneficial for the community.
The head chef appeared in the corridor behind me. He had heard most of it. He looked at the manager for a moment. Then he told him, in the most direct language available, that the answer was no, that the notebook was mine, that the recipes were mine, and that if they wanted to build a good menu, they were welcome to hire someone talented and treat them with respect, and perhaps this time write things down themselves. The manager left. We went back to service.
Laughs. Did he actually think that was going to work?
Apparently, I said.
What a time to be alive.
It has been about 2 years. The sports club is still open. I want to be clear about that. I am not claiming credit for some dramatic collapse. They found their footing eventually, hired new cooks, built a version of consistency. But the version they built was not the one they had. The investors who got nervous in that first year, some of them did not come back. The reputation for food that the club had built, gradually and painstakingly. Now, over the years I was there, some of that reputation walked out with me. Not all of it, but enough of it that they knew it had walked out. I heard from Priya, the cook who had caught my eye on my last day, about 6 months after I left. She had moved on too. She told me what the kitchen had looked like in those first few weeks without the notebook.
It was chaos, Jamie. Nobody knew anything. The head chef kept saying it was fine, and everyone could see it wasn't fine. They were having to call the suppliers to ask about their own orders because the booking notes weren't consistent with the menu, and nobody could remember what was on the menu anymore. It was like watching someone realize they don't know how to drive because the GPS is gone.
She paused.
You should have seen Marcus's face when the reviews came in. 50 in one day. He went the color of the cream sauce.
I told her I was sorry for her. I meant it. She was the one still in that kitchen, trying to make something work with the tools left behind. As for me, I am still at the restaurant across town. In 2 years, I have gone from line cook to sous chef. We have a regular review in a regional food guide that calls our menu quietly outstanding. I have started teaching an evening class at the local hospitality college, passing on what I know to apprentices who remind me of myself at 22. I'm sitting in a kitchen writing things down. I still have the notebook. It sits on my shelf at home now, largely retired because most of what's in it has been memorized or improved upon. But I keep it because sometimes you need to be able to hold the thing in your hands. People sometimes ask me if I feel bad about what happened to the club, about the reviews, about the investors who pulled back, about the chain of events that I set in motion, perhaps without fully intending to, on the day I picked up that notebook and walked out. And I always think about this carefully before I answer. Here is what I feel. I feel that what happened was a direct and honest consequence of the decision that was made. Not a punishment I designed, not a trap I set. A consequence. They decided that a fully qualified chef was too expensive. They decided that the knowledge that ran their kitchen could be replaced cheaply. They made that calculation and they acted on it. And the outcome of that calculation, the reviews, the customers who followed me, the investors who wavered, was simply the reality of what they had decided, the price of it. I feel that the people who suffered most, the kitchen staff who had nothing to do with the decision, the front of house team, the cooks who stayed and tried to rebuild, did not deserve to suffer. And I wish they hadn't had to. That part is not satisfying. It never is. But I also feel this. If you build an institution on someone's knowledge and then decide that knowledge is not worth a fair wage, you are not making a business decision. You are making a gamble. You are gambling that the knowledge lives in the institution and not in the person. And sometimes you win that gamble. But sometimes the knowledge walks out in a spiral-bound notebook in a chef's apron pocket. And then you find out, very quickly, what you were actually paying for. They found out. What I would tell anyone watching this, anyone who is an apprentice, anyone who is early in their career, anyone who is pouring their knowledge into a job and not yet seeing it reflected in their compensation or their security, write things down in your own handwriting, in your own notebook. The institutional memory of every organization you ever work for will try to absorb your skills, your systems, your improvements, your innovations, not through malice necessarily, but through the path of least resistance. Things you create at work tend to be assumed to belong to work, but your knowledge belongs to you. Your methods belong to you. The way you approach a problem, the technique you've refined, the system you've built, that lives in you, and it will walk out with you when you leave, whether they realize it or not. Know what you carry, know its value, and always know which notebook is yours. I want to tell you one more thing. Last month, a new apprentice started at the restaurant. Young, nervous, enthusiastic in the particular way that people are enthusiastic before they know enough to be anxious. On her first week, I watched her do something that made me stop in the middle of what I was doing. She had a notebook, small, spiral bound, sitting in her apron pocket. During a quiet moment in prep, I saw her writing in it, carefully, methodically, the way you write things you want to remember. I asked her what she was doing. She looked up, slightly embarrassed, as if she had been caught doing something odd.
Just writing down the recipes, so I get them right. Is that okay?
I looked at her for a moment. I thought about a kitchen I had worked in for 4 years. I thought about a manager who smiled a lot and remembered names. I thought about 50 reviews and a meeting in a corridor and a notebook on a passenger seat in a car park on a Tuesday afternoon. That's exactly right, I said. Keep doing that, and make sure your name is on the inside cover. She looked at me with the polite confusion of someone who doesn't yet know why that matters. She will. If this story landed with you, if you have ever been the person whose knowledge kept something running, whose systems nobody documented until you were gone, whose work was assumed rather than compensated, I want you to hear this. What you know has value. Real, measurable, financial value. The fact that you are willing to share it freely, to write it down, to teach it, to build something out of it, that is a gift you give. And gifts given to people who take them without acknowledgement are not generosity. They are exploitation with a warmer name. Know what you carry. Know what belongs to you. And when someone tells you to pack your things and take what is yours, know the full inventory. Because I walked out of that kitchen with my knives, my apron, and a spiral-bound notebook that cost $2. And that $2 notebook built a menu that rebuilt my career. Not because I planned it that way. Because I had always known it was mine. Smash that like button if this story hit home. Subscribe to Office Confession for new stories every week. Stories about the people who hold everything together quietly. And what happens when they stop being quiet. I'll see you next week. Stay safe, know your worth, and always put your name on your notebook.